Mr Austin, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in this important debate, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Stafford for introducing it and all of those members who supported this debate being heard. It's the first time that I've been an MP that we've had this debate on International Men's Day, as I was not in Parliament for the previous two occasions, so I'm delighted to be able to take part. I hope this will become a firm annual fixture in the Commons debating topics, and I hope, if I may say, that in future years it may be a debate that takes place in the main chamber. I think that these issues are important and deserve to be properly explored. Gender inequality is endemic right across society. The stereotypes, the assumptions, the rigid constraints on behaviour for both men and women, for girls and for boys. And of course, often our focus is on how women and girls lose out from this gender inequality, and it's right that we explore those issues. But as we are already hearing today, and will do more so in this debate, it is absolutely the case that men and boys are also negatively affected by gender inequality. And that's why gender equality is something which is good for everyone. I think sometimes in the media, these issues are pitted against, like men against women, as if there's some battle of the sexes going on, when in fact the reality is that working to create a world that is more gender equal is one that will be good for everybody, and that one we should be able to join forces to help to create. I particularly wanted to talk about healthcare, and particularly mental health, in terms of men and boys, because I think this is one area that is hugely an issue, and it's something which starts from very early on. We heard some of the statistics in the opening speech about how men are more likely to commit suicide, and indeed that is the biggest cause of death for men under the age of 45. And it really prompts us as a society to take a step back and to look about what services we're actually providing for men when they are finding themselves in trouble. And also that stigma element, which I think we are starting to break down. In recent years, there's been a welcome move towards talking more openly about mental health, and I know in the Chamber, honourable members from different parties have spoken very movingly about their own battles with mental health problems, and I think that's very much to be welcomed. But equally, I don't think anybody would suggest that we are there yet when it comes to breaking down that stigma. And also, importantly, making sure the services are there. For too long, mental health has been the Cinderella of the health service. It should be treated on parity with physical health problems. And as yet, those resources are not yet there in our communities when it comes to mental health provision for individuals who need that support. And of course, if it's more difficult for men to seek help in the first place, and then when they do, if those support services aren't there, then that's a double whammy. I'm aware in my own constituency of a really interesting project that has been set up specifically to help men with mental health difficulties called Brothers in Arms. And speaking to the founders of that, it is really interesting how their concern is that there is not enough specialist service that really particularly cater for men, recognising some of the difficulties men might have in coming forward. And so I think that organisations like that, and I know there's many other organisations like that, particularly south of the border, and many really strong campaigners and advocates who are raising these issues and putting them on the agenda. We really need to make sure that that is something which is supported, and indeed that progress is accelerated. Of course, I'll give way.
The point that she's making about men's mental health projects is a very good one, and would she agree that even for men in ethnic minority communities that the disparity is even greater? And would she welcome projects like the REACH project in my constituency, which tries to address those issues with the ethnic minority population?
Absolutely, the Honourable Lady makes a very good point, and trying to make sure that we reach out to groups who are less likely to come forward, and all of the different reasons why that might be, the intersectionality, if you like, of the different challenges that people are facing. It is important that services recognise that, and I'm sure we all have stories in our own constituencies of these types of services run by excellent individuals, some of whom might be paid, but many of whom are volunteering, and that is very much to be supported, but resource is also vital. I think in trying to consider, why it is difficult for men to come forward, we need to go quite early in life to start looking at the stereotypes that are placed on boys from, the earliest months and years of their lives. We talk about things like boys will be boys don't cry. People are told to man up as if, showing some kind of emotion is a sign of weakness in some way. And actually, I mean, the Honourable Member for Stafford talked about some kind of masculine gold standard and that pressure to be the breadwinner. And of course, for anybody who loses their job, that is a real problem that they're obviously, from a practical perspective, thinking about how they will pay the bills. But if you have layered on top of that some kind of view that because of your gender, it is specifically your job to be able to get the money to pay the bills, that adds a layer of additional pressure when actually, it's 2017 and we should be able to be sharing that responsibility, and different couples will have different ways of working out, if they're a heterosexual couple, of who might be working, whether both individuals in the couple are working, but we're not in the 1950s. We don't need to cling to these old stereotypes about saying it's always the job of the man in a couple to be going out there and being the breadwinner. And I think this leads to far too many men suffering in silence, and it is really damaging for boys and young men. There was a fascinating television programme on the BBC over the summer, which some honourable members might have seen, called No More Boys and Girls. And it went into a school and spoke to 7-year-olds and really explored gender issues and how even at that early age they were already being embedded. And one of the things that really struck with me, in addition to the stuff about the girls lacking confidence and underestimating their abilities, they did a sort of test to understand where the boys and girls were at on different issues. And they asked them to describe emotions and how many words they could use to describe different emotions. And the boys had far fewer words to describe emotions than the girls. It was a really marked difference between the boys and girls, with one exception. The emotion of anger was one that the boys had plenty of words to describe. And I think when you look at what that is saying about 7-year-olds, it really is something which is starting early. And so for all of the mental health services that we must absolutely put in place, we need to look at how we are parenting and the messages that young children are receiving, which I would argue are even more gendered than they were before. Compared to when I was growing up in the 1980s, it is much more segmented, pink for the girls and dark sludge colours for the boys. As the mother of a young boy, you go to buy clothes, you go to buy toys, and it is very clear what is supposed to be for girls and what is supposed to be for boys. As if somehow, liking rainbows and butterflies is mutually exclusive from liking buses and dinosaurs. My nieces, love dinosaurs and my little boy loves butterflies. Why should we be saying to children that this is something which is only for one gender or another? And it starts with that stuff that some people will say doesn't matter, but it means that girls and boys are being told very early on what their role is. When they read books and they see that more of the characters who go to work and have a job are the boys or the men characters, then that's why, or one of the reasons why, young boys and young men grow up thinking that it's their job to be the breadwinner, and that pressure is piled on. And that takes me to the issue of what happens at school. There is a gender gap in education that we should be as worried about as the gender gap in the workplace, and they are different gender gaps. And in education, the fact that boys are reading less than girls, and not just in terms of fewer books, but reading less thoroughly, is something we should be just as worried about as the fact that girls have tended to drop out of science or physical education in their teenage years. And in terms of these roles of, breadwinner and so on, the flip side of that is how we value men's role as fathers in our society. And I think that this is an incredibly important role that has often been dismissed and undermined. You just look at some of the stereotypes in popular culture, the Homer Simpson type of, dads just being a bit hapless and not being able to be up to the job, when actually men are just as capable as women at being parents. There is a myth that somehow women are naturally better at parenting. But, you know, breastfeeding aside, there is nothing that women can do as parents that men cannot do. It is not about women being just naturally better at it. It is about basically who spends more time doing it. Practice makes, well, maybe not quite perfect when it comes to parenting, because I don't think perfect parenting exists. But it is certainly about experimenting and about practice and about learning. And we should recognise that and recognise the role that men play. And why is it so important that men are involved as fathers? Well, we know it's good for children. Children do better in social and language skills. Their mental health is better if their fathers are actively involved. And amazingly, this intensive involvement of fathers is a better predictor of whether a child has higher academic achievement than their income is. It is that important to a child's development. But it's also good for men, Mr. Austin. Men are happier, healthier, more productive at work, and they live longer if they are involved fathers and close to their children. Finally, I just want to say there are cultural barriers to this that we must break down. I was delighted when I was a minister to introduce shared parental leave. It's my proudest achievement from my time in government, which helps parents to choose how to spend time looking after their children. That was a great first step, but it needs to be built upon. There's a review due next year, and I think we need to look at how shared parental leave can be extended to all parents, such as the self-employed, how we can have more dedicated time for fathers, and indeed look again at the pay for that to make it easier for dads to take that up. I've been delighted to contribute to this debate this morning, Mr. Austin, and I'm really interested to see what other members have to say.